Hi, my name is Sage Turk, and 2 years ago, something big happened that would change my life forever. Despite being an active Mormon, Christian, and believer for over 33 years, I lost my faith in God. What I didn't lose was my happiness, my hope, and the curiosity to explore every facet of this crazy adventure called life. And like every adventure, sometimes we can use a little guide.
Today's episode, Belief, starring me, Sage, and my special guest, fellow listener Drew. Also, the wacky religion quiz, and whether or not animals believe in God.
Infants on Thrones presents The New Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the New Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole. As always, I am your host, Sage Turk, and with me today is a special guest host, a listener, a self-proclaimed nobody like myself. So all of you out there that hate hearing people that aren't the infants, you're going to love this one. It's my good friend, Drew. Drew, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Sage?
Drew, I'm doing really, really good. And I'm really excited to have you on this episode. So today's episode is about belief, and why I thought Drew is a perfect guest, all you listeners out there, to bring on the episode is because he sent me this really awesome email, which was really kind of like an essay almost in and of itself, which laid out some really interesting thoughts on kind of the new religion that of atheism, if you will, a way of sort of looking at the concept of sort of God. And these sort of, well, you know what? I'm gonna let him explain it here in just a second. But Drew, one of the things I'd like to do first is, as tradition on the podcast, play a little game with you. How's it sound?
I'm always up for a game.
Okay, so the name of this game is What's Up with That Wacky Religion? Super catchy title, as always. They just roll off the tongue. So here's how it's going to work, Drew. What we're going to do is I'm going to read to you a description of, some might call a sort of fringe or lesser known or sort of quote unquote wacky religion. They're real religions. And then I'm going to give you some multiple choice answers as to what the name of the religion is. And if you already know the name of the religion, then you get 100 bonus points.
Bonus points? Where can I redeem them?
You can redeem them at your local liquor store. It does no good in Utah because there are no local liquor stores. Okay.
All right, I'm going to do my best to win all the bonus points.
Okay. Just fair warning. I found there's a real deep cuts from Wikipedia, so we'll see.
Okay.
All right. We're going to get started. All right, the first one, here we go. And listeners out there, you can play along if you want to. You also get 100 bonus points if you shout loud enough to either scare your cat or wife as you shout the answer. Okay, here we go. The first one. All right, this religion was formed in the Tanna state of Vanuatu. After they had been paid a visit by Queen Elizabeth, they began worshiping Queen Elizabeth's husband, Philip, and they actually treat his birthday on June 10th each year as their big, full-blown sort of religious observance holiday. So these guys worship Prince Philip, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This is an ongoing religion. It exists today. Is this religion called the Philippians? Is it called the Prince Philip and Acanians? Or is it called the Prince Philip Movement, or the PPM?
You know, it's funny. I've I've heard of these people because on the show An Idiot Abroad, he goes and he meets these people. They laid out all the things that you talked about, but for the life of me, I can't remember what they called them. I'm gonna go with the first one.
The Philippians? Okay.
Yeah, probably wrong.
I'm so sorry, Andrew. You are wrong.
No bonus points.
No bonus points on this one. It was the correct answer is the Prince Philip movement, the PPM. Yeah, these guys believe that Prince Philip is the manifestation of what they call the Earth Spirit, who, according to their legend, traveled far away across the sea to marry a powerful woman and would one day return to the island. So there's no more powerful woman out there than Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So, maybe they got something there. Who knows?
Yeah.
Prophecy fulfilled.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Number 2.
Checkmate.
All right, this religion was started by a man named Claude Vorilhons, a French race car driver. All right? He derived the name of this religion from an honorific name that was given to him by an alien master named Vorilhons, who had abducted him and revealed the true origins of mankind. He was taken to a distant planet called Elohim, and he was honored to meet the great philosophers and religious thinkers throughout history, including Jesus, Confucius, Buddha, and, get this, Joseph Smith. Wow.
Wow.
All right. This religion, is it called alienism? Is it called Scientology? Or is it Raeliism?
That's the Raelians, right? Raeliism.
Those are the Raelians. You got it.
Bonus points.
So Rael, as he was dubbed by the alien master Vorilhons, which, by the way, is the same last name as Claude Vorilhons. That's weird. Okay. I'm dubious of this religion, Drew. It says that not only was it revealed to him that life on Earth began when humans were created from alien DNA 25,000 years ago, so I guess it's better than 7,000, that Earth should also expect the arrival of Jerusalem in the year 2025. So we're getting real close.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
That's just 9 years away. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, here it comes. Raeliism. Amazing. Okay,
Wow.
Here we go.
Oh.
Number 3. All right, this following religion, it's a Hindu cult that's considered to have split off from the major sect of Hinduism in around the 14th century AD. This particular sect of Hinduism is known for their cannibalistic rituals. Followers are known to carry what's called a kapala, which is a cup made from a human skull. And these people are also known to eat things like rotten food, animal feces, even their own feces and bodily waste, because they believe that in order to achieve enlightenment, one has to debase themselves to the ultimate degree. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Are these guys known as the Hin-don'ts?
That's horrible.
Is it nastyism or is it the Agori?
It's the Agori, and they were on. I think it was Jackass #2.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Right?
Great references. That's actually where I got all this from. Idiot Abroad and Jackass.
Yeah, no. Between those two, you don't need much more.
Yeah, these guys are also known for the very pleasant sounding ritual of penis stretching, where you wrap your penis around a wooden pole or something and then just start spinning it. So
we're very multicultural around these parts here, and we participate in the same thing here.
Good. Okay. Good. Yeah. Well, I think those ward culture nights he'd go. Here's a little taste of the Netherlands, and hey, here's some.
Don't invite Grandma for that one, or do.
Welcome to Southern India with the Agori. Very good. Okay. Here we go. Here's the very next one is a religion that is a little bit more recent. It was formed in the late 80s. It's based in Japan, and it basically is comprised of people who are very scared and dubious of the presence of electromagnetic waves in the modern world. They blame electromagnetic waves for climate change, environmental destruction, and pretty much all the worldly ills, violence, that kind of thing. They became famous for a 2003 attempt to abduct an Arctic seal, which had somehow appeared in the Tokyo River, which they took as a sign of impending doomsday, and they blamed it on electromagnetic waves. So mysteriously appearing seals are also to blame from electromagnetism. Okay, here you go. Is this religion known as the Better Call Saulians,
That's horrible.
the Electromagnetists, or Panawave?
I got to go with the third one.
Panawave, that's it. Yep, Panawave. Yeah, these guys sound pretty interesting. I don't have too many more facts about them, but
I think you should doubt your doubts about them, and keep your mind open. You know.
I mean, I sometimes feel like if I get really quiet and I listen and I just like open up my heart, I can feel electromagnetic pulses,
Totally.
pulsing through me. Yeah, for sure. It's the spirit. The spirit is actually electromagnetic waves. Holy shit, we just figured it out. The Holy Spirit's
Excellent.
magnetism. We got it.
Excellent.
All right, here we go. This next one is the largest neo-pagan religion in the world. This religion was founded in 1962 by a man who was, of course, named Oberon Zell Ravenheart, with his wife Morning Glory. Okay, so obviously,
Can I jump ahead and guess? Is this Wicca?
no, it's not Wicca.
It's
However,
not Wicca.
It's close. It is a neo-pagan religion. They do worship the earth itself in the form of Gaia.
Oh, okay.
And here we go.
Gaia movement. Don't know how you pronounce it.
I actually don't. I think it's. Oh, maybe it is Gaia. What was Captain Planet? Oh, okay. Captain Planet called it Gaia, Spirit of the Earth. There you go. Which is actually one of my little jokey things. Is it called Hippy Dippyism? Is it Captain Planetism? Or is it the Church of All Worlds?
I've got to go with the third one.
Church of All Worlds, man.
Yeah.
You're doing great. Rough start at first, Drew, but now
I got 300 bonus points by this point.
yeah, you're doing real good. So, fun fact, the head of the church is known by the title of head primate, and their followers are known as waterkin. Go figure.
Waterkin.
Yeah.
Oh, do they believe in the aquatic ape theory?
Ooh. Probably
You know about the aquatic ape theory,
Yeah,
right?
I do. Yeah, it's supposedly instead of us evolving from plains walking apes, we evolved from like waterlogged swampy apes, right? It's something like that, coastal apes.
Duh. Why do you think there's webbing between our toes and our fingers?
Yeah, duh. Why do you think if you try hard enough, you can actually breathe underwater? Anybody listening? Try it. It's uncomfortable, but you can try it. All right, next one. Here we go. This one is really fun. I loved discovering this one. So this is a spiritual movement, one of the only ones in the world known to worship a motorcycle. Okay.
Awesome.
So this religion is based, again, in India. But it started with an unusual shrine that uses a motorcycle that was owned by a popular sort of movie star daredevil named Ambana. He died in a road accident, and the day after the motorbike was taken into police custody, the very next day, it was back, fully formed in the spot of the crash. So it, along with a picture of the former owner, is now worshipped as a deity.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh. I should be more respectful, right? We're supposed to respect.
Well, it's the laugh of pure awe and joy in finding what could potentially be the one true religion. Yeah.
Good point. Good point.
Just fills you with joy. Okay, so is this religion known as Harley Davidism, World's Fastest Indianism, or the Bullet Baba-ism?
It's got to be the third one.
The Bullet Baba-ism, yeah. Bullet Baba. That was the name of the dude riding the motorcycle, his magic motorcycle that came back from the dead.
Wow.
Like some other famous religious figure we might know about.
Ah,
The similarities are creepy.
they are.
3 days later, that motorcycle rose from the dead, fully formed. Okay, we've got just a couple more. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. this religion, some argue whether or not it's an actual religion or just a movement. Again, that word. But who really cares about the distinction? This is just a game. So this particular church, it has all the trappings of a church. People get together. They have sermons. They have pamphlets. They sing. However, their most famous saying or commandment is, save the planet, kill yourself. Their belief is that people should not procreate, that the earth is being overpopulated, and that both suicide and, castration or abortion, things that would basically remove the ability to have children, are all seen as sort of divine. Sterilization. That's the word I was looking for. So this religion, are they known as the fun at partyists, the teenage angstians, or the Church of Euthanasia?
It's got to be the Church of Euthanasia.
Yes, the Church of Euthanasia. These guys were a hoot, I'll tell you right now.
Yeah, they certainly seem to look at the bright side of life.
Yeah, you take a look at some of their pamphlets and materials, and I will say you're not going to be bored at these particular church meetings. So okay, the Church of Euthanasia, fun stuff. Okay, here we go. So this one, you probably will actually get, but it's funny. I think people have heard about this religion over and over and might not even really get that it truly is a religion. So this is the religion that started by people worshiping the Ethiopian king Haile Selassie. The aim of the religious movement is to restore pride in the African... the Rastafari.
Yes.
Yes. Very good. You get triple bonus points.
We listen to Bob Marley Pandora Station every weekend here, so we're well prepared for that one.
Yeah, very good. I assumed. Yeah, it's just I had always, growing up, heard Rastafari and then heard the stuff and never really knew of them as a religion until he finally got into college and started reading. It was like, oh, they were Zionists. The belief or rejection of Babylon, and truly the use of marijuana as a ritual, as an actual spiritual tool.
We've out of my garage, we've got some Rastafari books that my wife had when she was in high school and college. Yeah, it's a real thing.
All right, so final one. I'm gonna flip this around. So we just talked about Rastafarianism. Drew, don't let me down. Can you describe for me Pastafarianism?
Yes, and I can, because my wife and I were married under the authority of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Not kidding.
Wonderful.
We're both ex-Mormons. For both of us, it was our second marriage, and we looked at our temple ceilings and saw, hey, we've got this memory of getting married by this old guy. Seemed like a nice guy, but we had no connection to him. We didn't know.
Right.
We wanted something more personal this time, and so we wanted to just ask a mutual friend to marry us. And I called him one day and asked if he could get ordained online, and he chose the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. And by the end of the phone call, he was ordained. And so, on my wife and I, on our marriage certificate, says we were married under the authority of the Church of the FSM.
That's amazing.
So, Pastafarianism.
Drew, that's great. I will say that the Flying Spaghetti Monster sort of Jesus fish knockoff is my favorite of the Jesus fish knockoffs. Either that or the one that's the Darwin fish, or the Jesus fish eating the Darwin fish. I also kind of like that one.
The truth fish eating the Darwin, yes.
Yeah. I just want one that's just like a never-ending chain of
right.
The Darwin just fish eating a smaller Jesus fish and even smaller Rastafarian fish.
Just like a Pablo Picasso Guernica of fishes eating each other.
Exactly.
Just in the most grotesque ways.
Why has this not happened yet? And then at the end, it's just in the corner, there's a little Church of Euthanasia fish just ending it all. Just
oh, totally.
Just laying down in the sun and dying. Awesome, Drew. That very, very good. You earned so many bonus points. You've definitely earned the right to go to your local liquor store and buy the alcohol of your choosing.
Right.
I
Thank you.
so bestow this upon you. So
Thank you.
so Drew, one of the things that, like, okay, so moving so moving past religion, particularly the Mormon religion, one of the interesting angles for me was I have always been fascinated by religion.
Me too.
I the funny thing is, like, it always came from the sort of Mormon lens. Like, you'd get the sort
Right.
of the BYU manual that's like world
Yep.
religions, right?
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yep. That was a very formative class for me. But
Yeah.
yes.
I ended up traveling to India for a little while many years back, and just fell in love with, like, the whole, you know, panoply of Hindu gods and deities.
Hmm.
And really, it for me, it sort of scratched this itch of, like, you know, I loved X-Men comics. I love sort of superheroes, and those are our modern day gods, right? The sort of
Hmm.
mythos of these characters that have powers. And I loved Greek gods, the
Hmm.
Roman knockoffs, that kind of stuff, because they felt like, hey, these are superheroes. I can get behind them. This is the guy that has thunder, and this is the many-armed, sword-swinging god of the Hindu. Like,
Yeah, they're
just
fun to learn about.
cool stuff. Yeah. The thing is that there was always this disconnect where I was like, hey, I'm learning about these funny, kind of superhero-y guys without even, like, a shred of, like, respect for, hey, people really believe this as
Yeah.
deeply and as profoundly as I believe in my God,
Right.
right? And so, kind of like leaving religion, I was leaving a religion that not only had nailed as hard as it could into me that it was the one true church, but that other religions were not true, right?
Right.
And that even though there was kind of this lip service that started to arise, where it's like, yeah, they have some truth in them, you know, I would look at, like, well, maybe in the sense that, like, you should be nice, but I don't think there's any
Hmm.
truth in the idea that the Earth is on the back of a giant turtle, right, in space.
Hmm.
Well, coming out of religion and starting to kind of see things, I think, clearer and at least fairer, if nothing else,
Hmm.
there was, like, just this moment, this, like, really wild moment for me when it just sort of, it all came dawning on me that other people were not lesser than I, that they were not experiencing a bargain basement version of the spirit or truth. People legitimately believe in religions that us in the Western world would consider crazy. Not just the religions that are a slight turn difference from Mormonism, but religions that make really no sense to me, or that I don't have any
Hmm.
sort of, like, cultural connection to, but people believe it just as
Right.
strongly as I believe in my thing.
Right.
Did you ever have an experience, like, I mean, is this just me kind of having, like, a dumb epiphany that everyone else probably had, like, a million years ago? What are your thoughts, Drew?
No, I mean what you are describing, it it coincides with what I've experienced as well. I'll just give you a few examples. When I was a missionary, I one day, just asked the guy working behind the counter at the convenience store if he'd like a Book of Mormon. I chatted him up. I warmed him up before that, and he told me I already have a Book of Mormon. He'd already received one from a coworker at a previous job, and he flipped it around and said, "Would you like a copy of the Quran?"
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then I was like, well, gosh, in that split second, I was like, well, I'd be a hypocrite if I said no, because here I am going around offering a strange book of scripture to people, strange in the sense that they're not familiar with it, and yet I'm expecting them to be open-minded and take it. So here this guy is offering me a book of scripture that I don't believe in, but shouldn't I be as open-minded as I'm wanting other people to be when I'm going around offering Book of Mormon? So I said, yeah. So a week later, I returned. He had a Quran for me. That night I started reading it, and I had a spiritual experience, like reading the first chapter,
Oh, wow.
and along with the introductory material that was ahead of it, and that kind of threw me for a loop. Later, this is maybe about 10, 11, 12 years ago. I'm still a TBM. But I'm interested in religion, and so I'm going through this kick where I'm reading all the different books of scripture that I can get my hands on. And I'm on a business flight up to San Francisco, and I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita. And I got to the scene in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna manifests himself to Arjuna as the Vishvarupa, which is basically the the infinite form of God.
Right.
That's the one with the thousands of heads and the thousands of arms and thousands of legs. And of course, this is all symbolically supposed to represent, the infinite nature of God,
Right.
and the omnipotence of God. But I have this like spiritual experience as I'm reading this, like the spirit, and I'm talking the same spirit that I feel in the LDS building, the same spirit that I felt in the LDS temple. I get that, like hardcore, reading the Bhagavad Gita, and I couldn't understand it because here I am reading about this theophany, this Arjun, and I don't even believe Arjun's a real person. I think he's a mythological character, and I don't believe Krishna is a real God person, and I think it's mythological. And and so I'm reading what I believe is fiction, right?
Right. Yeah.
But there was something about the prose, something about the profundity of the concepts and the ideas, and this symbolism that really just hit me hard.
Yeah. Wow.
As I was in the process of exiting the LDS Church, I started attending a secular Buddhist meditation group, and at the end of the group, we would all do a little brief reading, and then we'd sit in a circle, like 20, 30, 40 people, and would each, if we had the opportunity, take a minute or two to just share some insights from the evening. So it's kind of like a little testimony meeting, a little open mic kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I felt the spirit, again, the same spirit that I felt in LDS settings. I felt that several times in that secular Buddhist meditation setting. And so, yes, I came to understand just through my personal experience that the LDS Church does not have monopoly on, quote unquote, the spirit, spiritual experience. This is as far as we can tell, a universal human phenomenon.
Right.
It's just part of being human. We're now starting to understand at the scientific level how it works. There are certain hormones and neurotransmitters involved, like oxytocin, dopamine, that the higher the level of these, hormones and chemicals in your body, the more likely you are to believe in God, the more likely you are to have these spiritual experiences, the more likely you are to believe in the supernatural. But yeah, so long story short, because I had spiritual experiences in the LDS Church, I believed in the LDS Church. But when I started having experiences outside a strictly LDS context, I started realizing, okay, this is how people can believe so devoutly in their religion, is their spiritual experiences in other religions.
Right.
Mormons don't have a monopoly on the spirit.
Well, and it's something that I started, even before kind of moving super consciously into sort of post belief. I definitely was like kicking around in my mind this idea that even though I was starting to reconsider what the reality of God, the thing that I was always holding on to was the reality of these, as you were saying, spiritual experiences that I had had. And I was never, even when I was finally moving to the point of saying, like, I don't think I believe in the church. I don't think I even believe in God. But I do believe that I've had some very profound spiritual experiences that I just found fascinating, like from a scientific point of view, from this idea that, hey, these things are real, and they're actually kind of even more interesting to me and magical if we consider that they are sort of these biological responses to something, to sort of think, why are we built to feel this way? Like, why is it so wired in this? Because it's a sort of complex thing. It's like a lot of things I can sort of track very easily on like sort of an evolutionary scale, of like complex sort of like romantic love. It's like that feels magical, but I can see how it's just a more complicated version of sort of like lust and the impulse to procreate,
Right.
And these other things that really are just sort of manifestations of, like no real different from a wolf pack. But then you got something like belief, and it's like, wow, this like propensity that we have to look for a bigger thing, to get an actual physiological response to certain combinations of words or tones or imagery. So interesting to me. And I actually remember thinking, like, does this put do I have a unique perspective on this thing from, say, like scientists or even just sort of, I call them lifelong atheists? One of the reasons doing this podcast is because I actually do think there is a difference. So people like, I think you and I, who we've experienced this real phenomenon, but to now be in a space where it's almost like, imagine that you've had an incredibly realistic alien abduction experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not willing to believe in aliens. Puts you in this really interesting space where you're like, okay, what was this thing that happened to me and why?
Absolutely. And I've continued to experiment with it just purely out of curiosity. There's a beautiful Buddhist temple in my city, and I like to pop in now and then just because it's a beautiful place to go. But when I go to these places, when in Rome, do as the Romanians, right? I like to. I just kind of try to pay attention to how the other people are showing respect or showing reverence, and I'll just kind of, go with the flow. And I walked into this temple, and I just kind of followed this Chinese guy who walked in before me, and he stopped and he paused and he bowed these respectful bows to these statues of Buddhas, and so I decided, well, I'll do that. And what was funny is like I bowed to the first Buddha, and like something washed over me.
Yeah.
Like this really distinct, kind of tingly sense of awe and reverence. And that was kind of the first time I started realizing that just kind of going through the motions really can pull these triggers. Like, even though I didn't believe in the statue,
right,
that I was bowing to. There's also a Hindu, it's kind of like a Universalist Unitarian Hindu monastery about 15 miles from my house. And they do a very elaborate puja ceremony. You probably know from your time in India what that is. It's kind of the traditional Hindu way of worship.
Right.
They do a traditional puja ceremony up there at noon every day. And every now and then I'll pop in, and just participate in that. And even though I don't hold any metaphysical beliefs about, the efficacy of any of that, I cannot deny that oftentimes when I'm just sitting there observing the puja, something sweeps over me that's very beautiful, it's very powerful, it's very sweet. I don't know how to explain it. And I just love kind of forcing myself to confront these puzzles that, on the one hand, I don't believe in any of this on any sort of supernatural metaphysical level.
Right.
But on the flip side, it's a very real, emotional, cognitive experience.
Yeah, there's an actual response to be had. I mean, it just popped into my mind. Probably the worst analogy I've ever come up with. Certainly one of the crudest, but it's sort of like spiritual masturbation when you think about it.
Yeah,
it's like if recognizing that we did everyone out there listening to us right now, you had those experiences, you felt tingles, you felt a pleasurable response, you felt something in your heart and mind and quote unquote soul that, it was real. Well, that means that you are capable, your body is capable of producing these things. And I love what you're saying, Drew, that, just because now we in our minds know, okay, I don't believe this as something bigger or grander than what physics tells me, but I can sort of go out now and divorce myself from the romance, the relationship of religion, and get this sort of self-serving sort of pleasure response that's different. And that's what's interesting to me. It's different than the sexual pleasure response. It's different than the sort of eating food, sustenance pleasure response. There's truly like a fourth sort of need satisfaction center inside the human brain that I find so fascinating, and to sort of pick apart and see, well, what is it for you? Is it that sense of silence or community, or is it sort of being servile? I think when you said bowing to the Buddha, the thing I've been considering is, I think there's this little piece, maybe it kind of goes back to the wolf pack, where we have this sort of tendency to want to sort of follow, to have a sort of alpha leader above us, and it has to feel good to serve, has to feel good to sort of condescend ourselves, and give ourselves over to a leader, if you will. And I don't know if this is probably getting super hokey right now, but it just I think that finding what that is for you out there, believer. Look, that's powerful. It's almost like you're cheating. It's like I'm finding a way to plug into something that feels real good, starts to give me insight into, at least if nothing else for me, insight into sort of my human past, a connection to, hey, I'm feeling a primal feeling that I think people, well, how old is the Earth again, according to the Raelians? 25,000 years ago. So 25,000 years ago, when the first humans were created from aliens, they felt the same sort of thing, only it might have been on around fire, right?
Sure.
It's so interesting. Okay, so here's a heady question. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that's belief, and that sort of like feeling that we call, I think, the sort of pleasure physiological response to belief. Let's say that it is, and it has to be, part of this sort of sliding scale of evolution. So the question I have is, do you think animals believe in God?
I have no clue, but actually, there's an assumption in your question. You're kind of linking two things in your question that I personally don't link.
Ooh, okay.
You're linking having these experiences, these spiritual experiences, and believing. And what I've experienced, I resigned from the LDS Church 5 years ago. What I've experienced since leaving increasingly is that I'm able to have spiritual experiences without believing. Like the example I gave you of bowing to the Buddha, or like I don't believe in like a metaphysical Buddha that's like up in heaven, or Buddha Kolob, or wherever he is. Like I don't believe in that. I have immense respect for the teachings that are attributed to Buddha, and for Buddhist, secular Buddhist spiritual practice. I have immense respect for it. But like bowing in front of a statue, like I have like zero metaphysical beliefs connected with that, and
Right.
yet I can have a spiritual experience doing that. I love to frequent. There's a Hindu temple like 25 miles from my house, and I love to frequent it, and because I have spiritual experiences, and yet I don't believe Ganesh is like a god. I don't believe Shiva is a god. I don't believe Vishnu is a god. Like I don't believe in the existence of any of these. I think they're all mythological, and yet I cannot deny that I feel very strongly something overcome me when I'm in these, places that are deemed sacred to other people. So yeah, for me, that's the big enigma that I'm trying to solve: is how is it that I'm able to have spiritual experience without belief?
Right. Yeah, that's a perfect, I think, segue. And by the way, I'm going to pin you down. Clear answer. Do animals believe in God? Yes or no? Go.
I'm gonna have to believe. So I don't think they have enough of an evaluative or analytical capability, like to reason or think in an abstract sense. God is an abstraction. Like God is an abstract idea.
Yeah.
I don't think animals. Who knows? Maybe the squid and the whales and the elephants. Maybe they're really deep thinkers. Maybe they can think abstractly. But I'm not aware of any sort of conclusive evidence that any animal can think on an abstract enough level to even comprehend the concept of God.
Or could it possibly be that, can they not think abstractly enough to comprehend the existence of no God? Huh?
I don't think they can abstractly think about anything. So yeah, I think they're more concerned with where their next meal's coming from, and where a nice cool place is to lay down for a nap.
Right. Well, it's something that I know this is like probably the dumbest sort of line of questioning that I've ever come up with on this thing. But it just got me thinking. It's just like I think about the wolf pack. I think about the dog. I think about animals that have this sort of propensity to follow, right? That they have this sort of innate sort of like sense in sort of a master or hierarchy, a sort of thing that, again, I'm just trying to think like where was that crossover where humans like did belief or this idea of God, is it something that couldn't have really happened until after more abstract thinking came about and we were able to sort of use language and that sort of began this thing? Or could it be that this existed on a much more primal level that we even can't even necessarily comprehend, like how primal it is, and we just eventually, language sort of caught up to being able to sort of describe this sort of innate motivating thing that feels bigger than you are and you feel smaller than it, sort of thing. I don't know.
No, I can't say whether animals believe in God or, again, because of the abstraction, but I will say this, and this will be a little teaser to maybe lead into the next segment, is I think one can say that animals are God. You know, do you need to believe? Do you need to believe in something if you are it?
Ooh, that is a great
Right?
that is a great segue. You did it. You did it. Listeners, you're going to understand in a second why that's so great. So here's what we're going to do. So what you wrote me earlier, and that was the inspiration for bringing you here on the podcast, was beautiful. And if you would do us the honors, so listeners kind of buckle up. This is what Drew wrote to me. I'll let him just basically sort of go through it, and Drew can either read it or sort of summarize. I think you wrote it beautifully. It's a little long. It's okay. I don't care. I'm here all night. So you want to read for us what you wrote to me concerning what you titled Spirituality for Atheists?
Yeah. So here's the thing, and if I can just give a little context.
Oh, of course, please.
You know, when I resigned from the LDS Church, I got, as seems to be pretty common, all of a sudden my curiosity about science and what we can learn about, the big questions of the universe and life and consciousness and all that, what I can learn about it through science as opposed to, LDS church authorities. And so I started reading, Richard Dawkins, Lawrence Krauss, who wrote a Universe Made from Nothing or something like that. And the more I read, the more just my mind was blown with what Richard Dawkins refers to as the magic of reality. And what Dawkins, says, it really resonated with me, which is, look, we don't need to invent these mythological gods. We don't need to invent these mythological stories. What we find in reality, what we learn about reality through science, it is magical. I mean, it is awe-inspiring. It will inspire you with reverence and gratitude. And the more I kind of took on this study of just trying to understand what I could about the universe and my place in it through a scientific point of view, the more I just kept feeling like overwhelmed with this sense of awe and reverence and gratitude. The more it became sort of like a new religion for me.
Right.
A new sort of spiritual path for me, is scientific inquiry of what we can learn about it. And I learned that I just started to see a lot of parallels between what we're learning through science and what the ancients were kind of groping at.
Right.
Okay. And one of the things that the ancients were groping at, one of the things they were trying to figure out is, what is ultimate reality? And let me just give you an example, because, ultimate reality isn't like a term that you hear used much in common discourse. So let me just give a little example from one of the Greek pre-Socratic philosophers. There's Democritus, Epicurus. There's a couple others. They were the atomists of Greek philosophy.
Right.
And they basically, just through reason, just kind of deduced the following, which is, well, you can take a boulder and break it up into rocks, and then you can take those rocks and you break them up into pebbles. And you keep smashing those pebbles and they turn into sand. You keep smashing that sand and it turns into dust. And you keep smashing that dust and it becomes so fine you can't even see it. It just blows in the air. You can't even see it.
Right.
And they reason, therefore, that everything we see must be comprised of these tiny particles that are so small we can't see them. And they invented a name for these theoretical particles, and they called them atoms.
Right.
Okay. Well, 2,500 years later, modern science confirms what they just sort of rationally intuited, what they just sort of reasoned must be the case, is you can reduce reality down to atoms. The Indian sages, the Indian philosophers, they did a similar line of inquiry as the Greek philosophers, only they didn't end up at atoms like the Greek atomists did. The Indian sages ended with energy, and they gave a name to it, and they called it Brahman. And I see a big similarity here between what the ancients were groping at and what modern scientists tell us, which is modern scientists tell us ultimate reality. If there's something eternal in this universe, it is energy.
Right.
Energy, they will tell us, energy is what the universe and everything and everyone in it is made of. In the old days, they used to talk about energy and matter. They now have gotten away from that distinction because they say matter is just a form, an expression of energy. So, and they will tell us that this energy that is the universe, that it cannot be created or destroyed.
Right.
Well, if something can't be created or destroyed, that means it's eternal. That means it's immortal. That means it's undying. It has no beginning and no end. And so we can also say about this eternal energy that it's omnipotent. Everything that was created by or generated by this eternal energy. We can also say that it's omnipresent. It's everywhere. Everywhere, as far as we know that it exists, you can find this eternal energy there. So I just started seeing, that if anything, from a scientific point of view, if anything in this universe deserves to be called God, it is this eternal energy.
Right.
That is the universe, that is you, that is me, that is your pets, every tree, every flower, every animal, every fish, everything, every galaxy, every star. It is all, they are all just some of the infinite expressions or infinite manifestations of this eternal energy. And that's the other thing to kind of point out about this eternal energy, is it seems that this eternal energy has an infinite number of expressions, right? It can be this eternal energy exists as a drop of water. It exists as a supernova. It exists as a ladybug. It exists as a sequoia.
Right.
The manifestations and expressions of this eternal energy are seemingly infinite. And, I don't know about you, but when I think about this and when I talk about it, I just start to get this deep sense of awe and wonder. And, my mind is blown by it. And the next question from there is, well, what is our attitude towards this eternal energy? Are we indifferent to its existence? Do we not really care? Does it not really interest us? Are we just sort of apathetic about it? Or, do we have some sort of disdain or dislike for it? Do we go the nihilist path and go, oh, eternal energy, who gives a fuck? We're all going to die anyway.
The Church of Euthanasia, right?
Yeah, or, do you kind of take the path that Carl Sagan took and Albert Einstein took, and a lot of people, I think Baruch Spinoza, the philosopher, and so many others have taken, which is to go, holy shit, this is mind-blowing. Like, there actually is something in the universe that, if anything deserves to be called God, it's this. Now, there are a few things that, needless to say, differentiate this conception of God from all the Western conceptions of God. The Western conceptions of God, particularly the Mormon one we grew up with, is God's a man. God's a person, right? And even in the Islamic and, mainstream Christian and Judaism, God has the attributes and qualities of a person, and he's very human-centric, right? Like, he's just very involved and concerned about human beings. And their affairs, and he's got a plan for them. He's got a lot of commandments, and in the Doctrine and Covenants, he's even concerned about what plots of real estate Joseph Smith should buy. Right? I mean, he's just abundantly concerned intricately with human affairs. Needless to say, this idea of eternal energy, this conception of God, is very different. This one doesn't care about who wins the football game this Saturday. And isn't going to help you find your car keys, etc. But think of this: you are it, and it is you. One of the most profound lines in Hindu scripture, in the Chandogya Upanishad, is you are that. It's a father talking to a son, and he's explaining to him this mystery of Brahman.
Mm-hmm.
It says you are that. When you look at, like Carl Sagan said, we are stardust. When you look up at the Milky Way, that's you. You're looking at yourself. You're looking at, we're made of stardust. So why is it that we sense that there's something out there? And why is it that we sense that there's something inside of us?
Right.
Well, we've got this eternal energy inside us. I mean, we are comprised of it. We are a piece. And if you're going to use the word God to refer to this eternal energy, each of us is a piece of God. Or as Jesus said, ye are gods, like lowercase g, right? So the long story short is, this sort of ironic thing for me is that going down the atheist path and going down this, the scientific inquiry path, ironically kind of led me back to my own kind of conception of God. And I'm not really adamant. It's not really important to me to use the word God to refer to this eternal energy. My point is simply that if the word God is going to exist in the English language, and if we're going to use it and we're going to apply it to something, the most deserving thing to apply that word to is this eternal energy.
Right.
So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Oh man, my mind blown again just hearing you describe it live, Drew. Even better than the email. So many angles to attack this from, but that's sort of the first one that I want to talk about, because very, very well said, and I think you encapsulate a lot of what I felt one of my favorite phases or parts of moving into atheism was allowing myself to feel even more awestricken by really the the amazing, if you will, sort of coincidence that we even exist at all, right?
Right.
That somehow this energy that does comprise everything, and as you say, has what has to be assumed infinite manifestations, that eventually manifested itself into a me
right.
that could even contemplate itself. So amazing. And actually why your particular take on it I thought was so worth discussing is because, as you mentioned at the end, you talk about God as a construct. It does have meaning in the English language. It's something that culturally we are familiar with as a concept. And I think I've seen this I had this in my own heart as I started to move to atheism for a little while. I went through this phase, and I've seen in others, again, especially those that I think have been in this space for longer or came to it, I think, more violently maybe than I did, this feeling of wanting to reject wholly any sort of trapping that smacks of religiosity, that smacks of metaphysics, that sort of thing.
Right.
And I fully understand that, by the way. I fully understand that, God is like the construct of Atlantis. It's like, once you realize, oh, the only source of this thing, like, you can look around the map and you can try to find, where was the lost city of Atlantis? We'll never know. You take it one step further and you go, oh, this came from a fictional source in the first place. It was like Homer or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
The first person to ever mention this thing, it was clearly in a fictional work. It never had a basis in reality to begin with. It just sort of got appropriated into culture. Oh, this thing, it doesn't even have any intrinsic value. The search for it and for a construct of what could have possibly been the city of Atlantis, and why I use Atlantis is because when you get to that sort of point, it's like, oh, I'm not going to devote my life to being a treasure hunter and finding Atlantis any longer, right?
Right, and that's why for me, that's why for me, and I know exactly what you're saying is, if you think of God as Shiva, Vishnu, Zeus, Thor, Elohim, It's you can the idea of God just sounds ridiculous and laughable and preposterous, and you can just kind of easily wave your hand at it and dismiss it as a bunch of fictional nonsense.
Right.
I think though that the word God, though, when you look at the axial age, you'll see in the Greeks, you'll see the Indians, and then you'll later see, like with Aristotle and not Aristotle, with Aquinas and Saint Augustine, that they're really, when they're talking about God, when they're searching for God, they're looking in more philosophical terms. They're looking for what's ultimate reality. What was the thing that was here first?
Right.
What was the thing that everything came from?
Right.
What is the thing that is permanent and eternal about the universe? Or anything that's permanent and eternal about the universe? And, they all came up with their answers. Like I said, the Indians came up with the word Brahman. The Greek philosophers had their atomist theory. Modern scientists tell us today it's energy. It's
Right.
this eternal energy. That is ultimate reality. So that's the sense in which I say, if anything deserves to be called God, if you're going to think of God in terms of ultimate reality, then we know through science that what deserves to be called God is this eternal energy that is the universe.
Right. Well, and I think, and in hearing you describe it and reading through this and really just, some lights turning on, why even talk about belief is that I have this sense as you speak that if we consider that there is something truly primal and real in our genes or in our makeup to work in this way, our brains look for things that can, problem solving, pattern finding, wanting to sort of attribute a reason, and often we want sort of like a singularized reason. It's why we've humanized these things. Like, it makes sense that there would be a person leading this instead of a thing you can't imagine,
Mm-hmm.
And it's simplistic, but we're built in this way. And what I see you describe is, hey, instead of, ultimately, and it's totally fine if you go this way, instead of ultimately saying like, no, I reject wholly that God is not real, that it is a fake construct, there is no value there, there's nothing to be had from it. Like, yeah, you can live a totally rational, happy, fine life, but to me, there's this interesting puzzle before me where it's like, hey, my concept of God has been blown apart. Can I take some of those pieces back together, and can I use this idea of God that obviously my brain is wired to want to do something with? And I need to be careful. I need to temper it, so I'm not trying to rehumanize something. I'm not trying to, again, like you're saying, treat this force of the universe as something that will find my car keys or say, quote unquote, loves me, But this is something that I spent my whole life contemplating things like this. And when I start to take it apart, I start to think, okay, what was it when I said I believed? It meant something different than when I say I believe in electricity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when people give you that sort of analogy where it was like, okay, I believe when I flip this switch, it's going to come on. I mean, they'd even give you that example in church. And I always thought, that's not the same though, because what I'm considering in belief is trying to forge a personal connection to this thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Trying to almost ascend so that I can have a connection. And it's all very selfish now when I think about it, but it's like I needed something from this idea. I needed comfort. I needed answers. I needed what felt like sort of a personal connection and some personal, sort of stuff taken care of. I had a wish list of things I needed,
Mm-hmm.
There's so many of these things, but really what it was this idea that, okay, it's one thing to recognize in, I think, forces, to recognize that there are these sort of consequences, and there are these just sort of machinations of the universe that do exist. But belief for a religious person was trying to forge a personal connection to it that was satisfying somehow.
Right.
And so for me, I see that we can definitely experience sort of wonder, and I've been sort of looking for like, what's that step past it where I can now, again, sort of cheat the system like we did before and say, can I take that concept of belief or because I am using it sort of interchangeably with things that maybe I shouldn't be using that interchangeably with. But for me, it's sort of the same thing, that if you can take God and sort of repurpose it and say, if anything deserves to be called God, it's this ultimate connecting fabric of the universe called energy, and how wonderful it is. Instead of just saying there's no such thing as God and there's this thing that deserves to be called God, but it's not even that special, because if it's everything, it's also nothing. I find it very hopeful to think of it this way, and I find it suddenly like, hey, I'm a product of a brain, which just so happens to be a configuration of atoms that somehow resulted in consciousness, right?
Right.
What's to say that there isn't a possibility of a configuration of atoms bigger than anything we can understand, more complex than anything we could imagine, that results in a type of consciousness that's higher and more fulfilling and more alert than anything that we even experience now? Because, and why I just go there is because ultimately, for me, I have a hard time finding satisfaction in something that will end the moment I'm not conscious of it anymore. But it doesn't have to do that. I'm not actually saying that it has to result in, if I die, there has to be some consciousness past it. I just think it's comforting to know that this thing, that the workings of the universe eventually resulted in a thing like me.
Yeah.
And if it's going to last infinitely and it's going to keep transmuting and keep changing into something different, it just feels sort of cool to open our minds and say, hey, there's amazing possibilities out there. We're all connected to something somehow, and maybe you can even find comfort in not having physical consciousness, but truly, finally, 100% feeling comfort and connection in being truly a part of the universe. It's not that it's bigger than we are. We're bigger than it. We are it. We're on equal playing field with every other thing in the universe.
Right. And for anyone listening who, doesn't like the word God and, doesn't like the word spirituality, which I totally get, because I had such a bad taste in my mouth for religion. It took me a few years to, be able to even allow myself to sort of entertain these sort of, inquiries. I would say, okay, throw the words away, because words are arbitrary. It's sounds and symbols that we, right?
Right.
Words are the finger pointing to the moon, and the moon being the ultimate truth, right? And the words are just these imperfect, clumsy things that point to the moon, like a finger pointing to the moon. Okay, so don't get hung up on the words. Don't get hung up on God or spirituality, whatever. Try to concentrate on the overriding truth that we're talking about here, which is the entire universe. Scientists tell us that once upon a time, just before the Big Bang, the entire universe consisted in a single point smaller than an electron.
Right.
Okay? Just think about this. Once upon a time, if we follow the chain of causation from today backwards in time, where it's going to begin, as far as we know, is this single point smaller than electrons. Just think of what is inside this little single point smaller than an electron. The Himalayas.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
The oceans. Okay, now we're just talking about a few features of one planet that is in just one galaxy of thousands of galaxies.
Right.
Okay, every person that has ever lived was inside this point. Every piece of music, every artwork hanging on every wall of every museum, every tree, every flower, every animal, everything that you've ever seen was comprised within this single point smaller than an electron. I don't know how you can think about this and talk about this without just becoming overwhelmed with awe.
Yeah, agreed.
Not awe over some mythical fictional story about a mythical superhero, but we're talking about like Richard Dawkins called it, the magic of reality,
Right.
And for a lot of us who have a faith crisis and leave the church, a lot of us, like I've realized I'm this way. I'm just kind of wired to have spiritual feelings. I just am.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us who leave are, if not most of us, right? And there's a sense of loss, when you kind of lose a spiritual dimension to your life. There certainly was for me a sense of loss for a period. For me anyway, this has rekindled it, and I've found a new spiritual home. And um, you know, I like thinking and talking about these things. I like sharing these ideas with my fellow ex-Mormons because I agree with Dawkins. I believe that there is plenty of magic in reality to keep us inspired and to give us a sense of awe and gratitude. We haven't touched this yet, but let me talk about ethics, okay? Like
Yeah.
let me respond to the objection that I can hear the theist, who hates this idea of an impersonal God, who hates the idea of this God that is not human centric. And they say, well, if you don't have a God with his finger writing commandments on 2 stone tablets, where do you get your sense of morality and ethics? Well, I think that the fact that we're talking about the fact that there is this one great whole called energy, and we're all pieces and parts of it.
Right.
And that means the idea that we're brothers and sisters is not just a nice idea. Like, it's true, like biologically speaking, we're all of the same species. We trace back to the same parents. And here's where it gets cooler, those redwoods and those whales and dolphins, they're our cousins,
Right. Well, they're all on the energy spectrum, right?
Right. And the fungi and, the mushrooms and the bacteria and everything. I mean, and then you go back and, the stars that you see in the sky at night, we're all made of the same stuff. Right now, we're all wearing a different temporary form, and they're
Right.
just temporary forms. And that's really hard. Those of us raised in a Western religion, it's really hard to just be able to accept the idea that you and I, that we're just these temporary forms.
Right.
But I find the glass half full when I think, yeah, but we're temporary forms of something that's infinite and eternal and immortal and indestructible, and the human species is wired for survival. When you read history about the shit people have been through and put up with and survived,
Right.
and you just wonder, God damn, where do human beings get this level of fight in them?
Right.
To hang on when it seems like there's no bloody reason to hang on, right? And it's like, we're made of this indestructible stuff.
Right.
We're made of this eternal energy.
Well, and that for me, I think segues into a point that works as a bit of clarification, but also just clarity for me. Earlier when I was talking about this idea that consciousness might be something that could go on and exist. For me, it's more just, it's fun to think that there's a possibility out there. I truly don't believe that to be the case, because not just do I not believe it, but I'm starting to find that the concept of a piece of me that I might not be able to consider personal in my human experience, I might find impersonal. It's still the energy that is me, that's making up me, that's powering this whole thing, does continue on, and it feels like almost the ultimate example of sort of self-sacrifice. Or, when we talk about Christ in the church, there's like this idea that he gave himself this ultimate sacrifice, and yet I realize now it rang so hollow, because what did he actually give? He still ended up being a god. It's like he has all power. It's like, truly what would have to me been a more profound sacrifice was Christ was obliterated from existence, that he literally gave his atoms and his self back to the universe, and now there is no such thing as Christ anymore. That would have been for me the mindfuck of like, whoa, ultimate sacrifice. And that's kind of what each one of us, if we can eventually get to the point of accepting sort of the beauty of, you will go on. You might not know what it's like to go on. You might not experience it. You might not be conscious of it, but you do. And it eventually does, become something else. And knowing that that's the way it is, and that's as far as we can understand fact, I think that we can repurpose our own brain hardwiring, the propensity we have for belief, and even a propensity for contemplating God, because part of atheism is really sort of pointing to the whole where there is no God, as opposed to never even like addressing the concept. Like, we're all working from this construct that it's either there or not there, never was there. We can do that, I think, in a really unique way as ex-Mormons, ex-Christians, sort of ex-believers, that if we can get past the sort of maybe embarrassment or the sort of faux pas of talking about belief or considering it as a valuable thing, I don't know, I think we can transcend into something where it's like, hey, I want to feel connected. That's valuable to me. And I feel connected now, instead of this one easy sort of pellet-driven theater bar of I go to church and I say these prayers and I do this thing and it just sort of comes to me easily. Well, now I feel like we sort of have this buffet of like, hey, if I want to feel better, if I want to just get sort of that little electric buzz, like I can kind of go do this. Or if I need to feel profundity, I can go do this. Or if I need to feel sort of peace, I can do this. And if I need to feel at one-ment, or if I need to feel some semblance of sort of like even love, I think you can get that. It comes now in a different form, and it's something that I think takes a little bit more effort.
It does. For me, there's two main, if you want to talk about spiritual practices as an atheist, there's two main practices that work for me. And, one is just to be out in nature, and it's funny to me that as far back as we've got history, people both in East and West have gone into nature. They've left the city, they've left the village, they've left this artificial, bullshit world that us human beings create, and they try to get back into the raw, you get back into nature. And, Emerson and Thoreau, like the transcendentalists, they wrote just such beautiful poetic language about the spiritual experience of just immersing oneself in nature. And I've got, plenty of ex-Mormon Facebook friends where I see every Sunday, especially you guys living up in Utah, they'll post photos of their mountain church, they call it, right?
Yep, yeah.
They go up into the mountains, right? But that does something for them, and it does something for me. So, one thing I'll do for spiritual practice is go hiking in the hills. And if you really kind of ponder these ideas that we've been talking about, you can have some really beautiful, blissful experiences. The other thing I would say is just meditation.
Yeah.
If you're going to, think of this eternal energy that we are made of and that the universe is made of, if you're okay using the word God for it, that means if you want to find God, one thing you can do is open your eyes and just look around.
Right.
Everything you see is God, right? Everything you see is made of this eternal energy. So if you're okay using the word God, ultimate reality, to refer to this eternal energy, you can just open your mind and open your eyes, and everything you see is God. The other place you can look, though, is inside. You are made of eternal energy.
Right.
That means, if you're okay using the word God for this eternal energy, God's really close, like really, really close to you at all times.
Yeah. Well,
and I'm not saying it's going to talk to you, but
right.
But I have, through meditation, experienced states of mind and states of being that are just very beautiful, powerful, sweet, states of mind. And why not?
Why not?
Like, why not do it?
Andrew, I think that's beautiful. So I had we were talking earlier about what we're going to cover in the podcast. We've gone a little bit long, and I think we've answered this. There was a listener question that really got me thinking, and it was another reason why your email to me was just sort of perfectly timed. Some might even say it was miraculous. And the question that came was this, and it basically states, a listener, this is a woman, she wrote me and she says, I just feel like a part of me is missing now. And I think that part is the magic of life, hope or belief in something bigger. Do I just need to accept this as fact? And we've, I think, answered that. But I think in summary, what I would say from what I hear you saying and what I'm feeling inside of myself is that absolutely you will feel a pressure leaving this church, and you almost need to go through this of erasing the sense of magic for a little bit of time, from your vocabulary, because it's this cleansing. In my mind, this is how it happened for me. It was a cleansing process to say, oh, there's no such thing as magic. There's no Harry Potter. There's no letter to Hogwarts. There's no God. There's no Bigfoot. There's no anything. Sort of cleanse it. But ultimately, I realized I was sort of wrong, because it was suddenly what I considered magic were just things that I couldn't explain well, or that, I was sort of attaching these sort of cultural misunderstandings to. But ultimately, just as you said, and we've talked about this whole podcast, like, magic is wonder. Magic is, even when we say, like, ultimately, even if it is true, and I believe it's true, that this ultimate power, this thing that is God, is the energy that binds us, we still don't know how that works.
It's astonishment, right? It's awe. It's
and energy is just a word that starts with E and ends with a Y and really doesn't mean anything. It's like, how can a thing that's invisible be this thing that you feel? How can the atoms, the space between them, be grander than the space that makes them up? Like, we can still have wonder and awe. And I think that all we have to do is just look back to our own lives, and instead of saying, oh, I was so wrong, I was so mistaken, like, how naive for me to pray and to have felt good, like to have spiritual experiences and to say, well, those were bullshit. Those were nothing. I say, don't do that. Never do that. I say, try to understand what happened in that moment. See if you can recreate it, because those feelings, that belief, if that's what you want to call it, or that sort of relation to God, like, those are things that, again, your brain generated, and just because they were based on possibly what we'd call false assumptions doesn't mean that they themselves were false, The human brain is capable of generating these amazing experiences and this wonder that goes beyond, oh, that's cool. Really profound experiences. Absolutely, as an atheist, you're just as open to them as you were when you were religious. I guarantee it.
Right. I would say that, listener, if you felt like you've lost your sense of awe and wonder, and you're wanting to get that back, I think a great place to start is to read the book by Richard Dawkins called The Greatest Show on Earth.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
Where
I love that
one.
Yeah,
he just lays out basically how life came to be on this planet, and just reading that book is, I think, a source of many spiritual experiences and profound insights. I'd also just say, consider this, I'm just trying to loop back real quickly to your question about this idea of something living on, whether or not our consciousness lives on after death, because that is a big concern for a lot of people. I think of, what Mark Twain said, which is, I didn't exist for eons and never suffered the slightest inconvenience from it.
Right.
I can promise everyone listening right now that there will never be a moment in time where you are conscious of your own non-existence.
Right.
There will never be a time where you are conscious of your lack of consciousness. And just think about the fact that every night that you go to sleep, there's time that you're dreaming, but there's also this stage of sleep called dreamless sleep, and you're basically in oblivion. Okay? That's what death is going to be like. And it's not bad. In fact, if you get a really good deep sleep, you feel wonderful the next day. But just think of this. Here's where I find hope in nature. And I don't really feel like I need hope because, again, I'm not worried about ever experiencing an awareness of my own, non-existence, okay?
Right, yeah.
So I don't need hope. But just consider these couple scientific facts, okay? Life arises from death. Like, you walk into a forest and you look on the floor of the forest and everywhere is death. It's dead leaves, it's decaying logs and branches. There's fungi, growing off the decomposing stuff. The forest floor is death. The pine cone, the little pine seeds, those have to die, and then they get buried in the ground, they get watered, and they create life. When you look at just how life evolved, sentience came into being, consciousness came into being from a collection of insentient, unconscious things. Okay. So consciousness arises from unconsciousness and life arises from death. Okay. These are scientific facts. So, also for me personally, that means I got to keep an open mind, that, hey, maybe death seems like the end, and maybe it seems like, once your consciousness goes away because you die, it's never coming back. Who the hell knows? If consciousness arose from a collection of unconscious things, if consciousness can come from unconsciousness, if life can come from non-life, can anyone really say?
Yeah.
Like for certain?
I mean, that's so true. I mean, think of it.
This universe is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, think of it this way. I mean, there's literally two possibilities here, although there's infinite possibilities, but really there's two possibilities here. A, just as you said, there's total end to consciousness, but you're not aware of it, so you will not be suffering through it. You will not even be aware of your non-existence, right, as you said. But if it ever does turn back on, even if it takes 2 billion years, it will happen for you in an instant. So literally the moment you die, right, you either don't know and the rest of eternity is bliss, or you do know instantaneously. It's like, I'm back, baby. I don't know how it happened.
Right.
Somebody turned the Matrix back on and here we are. Yeah. Who knows? But I mean, look, that's the thing, is that the crazy making, and that's why I think things like belief and stuff, that we can start to put it back together, is because once you take apart and you step away from belief has to mean personal benefit, or belief has to mean a continuation of me to be valuable, well, then you start to see that, oh, there's all these other things that I can actually have belief and connection to, and a sense of awe and a sense of place within a system that, again, it could be just as transcendent. I do feel like even this conversation tonight, Drew, it's like, this is definitely welling up inside of me, those same familiar emotions and those same familiar, like, aha, I'm right, getting a sense of something bigger than me, and it feels great. And I really just want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. I had a blast. How about you?
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation. Yeah, I love talking about this, and so I'm always glad to have a listening ear and someone to bounce ideas off of and to exchange ideas about this stuff.
Yeah, well, and I would just encourage listeners out there, please share in the comments, like, what are the things that help you feel that sort of connection, things that you now consider as valuable as those sort of belief or sort of spiritual moments in your life. I'm really interested to know, because like you said, we hear about nature a lot. I think that's a really powerful and sort of foolproof go-to. But I've heard people also say that now they find great connection in things like sex, or I hear people feel like they have great connection in introspection. So like writing, like now creation feels so much better and so much purer. I'm just really interested to hear people out there. What do you do to feel that connection? Because again, there's so many people out there that they're struggling and they're feeling like now that they've been cut off from some piece of them that they held great value, and you can get that back. I totally believe that. So,
yep.
Andrew, man, thank you so much for joining me. Drew, I look forward to doing this again. So,
all right, thanks, Sage. Good talking to you.
Cool. Well, have a good night, and we'll talk to you later.
All right, talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to episode 6 of the new Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole. So what did we learn today? First, we learned that belief, or the propensity to believe, is a fundamental human trait, and one that should be respected, even if the things others believe in are different, strange, or at odds with our own sensibilities. Second, we learned that believing, or exercising the part of us that seeks to connect with something bigger or more fundamental, doesn't go away even after our faith in the metaphysical dwindles. Third, it is not only possible, but perhaps critical, to find the sense of wonder, awe, and enlightenment that we once called spirituality, even if we don't accept the existence of the spirit. Lastly, it is not a weakness to admit that the part of our lives that we lived by faith had times of happiness or comfort or just plain felt good. And even if we now claim atheism as our new outlook on life, exploring how others believe, what gives them comfort, and seeking after these things in your own life is a way to bridge the old you with the new. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, this is Sage Turk saying, Hail Bullet Baba.
From this distant vantage point, the Earth might not seem of any particular interest. But for us, it's different. Consider again that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit? Yes. Settle? Not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.